So now that you have figured out how to translate all those graphs and interpret what they mean, we're going to talk about how to write your own equations of lines when they give you different information. So the first thing that we want to practice is how to find the equation of the line when you're given a point and a y-intercept. And this is really what you've already practiced, but we're going to add something that you haven't yet learned, which is standard form. So as previously developed, the linear parent function is y equals x. And on that parameters lab, you graphed this over and over again and then talked about what happened to the graph when we changed the slope and the y-intercept. Okay? There are two basic ways to write the linear parent function. One is called standard form, and this is the one that you are the least familiar with. The second one is called slope-intercept form, and this is the one that you guys use all the time. So slope-intercept is y equals mx plus b, where m represents slope, and b is the y-intercept, which is 0b. Standard form is ax plus by equals c, and all it is this equation mixed up. So if I moved x to the other side, you would notice that you get this. So I do want you to have a highlighter, and I do want you to highlight the same information that I'm highlighting. The big things for standard form that you have to look for is that the variables have to be on the same side. The x value has to be positive, and there should be no fractions. These are the major components of standard form and what makes it very difficult compared to slope-intercept. So let's look at example 1 and see how we would find slope-intercept and standard form. So example 1 says find the equation of a line if the slope is negative 3/4 and the y-intercept is 0.5. Graph the line and then label the line with standard form of the equation. So the first part is noticing what they gave us. Well, slope, this is m, and they told us it was negative 3/4. And then they gave us the y-intercept as 0.5. Well, remember, this is our b value, and it's represented as 0b. So if we were writing down what they gave us, we would say that the m is negative 3/4, and the b is 5. Well, since slope-intercept is y equals mx plus b, all we have to do is substitute these values in. So we would say y equals negative 3/4 x, and then plus b would be plus 5. Plain and simple. And again, this is something you've already been doing. So now let's look at how we would get standard form. So you're going to start with slope-intercept form. Y equals negative 3/4 x plus 5. And now the very first thing that we highlighted, if you go back up and look, is that the variables have to be on the same side. So currently I have y on the left side of the equation and x on the right side. So I need to move x to the left. So just like normal, if we want to move something from one side to the other, we do the opposite. So then these cancel, and I would get 3/4 x plus y equals 5. So now we're close. We've got the variables on the same side. We need to check the other components. Well, it said that x has to be positive, and there should be no fractions. So if we start to look at our equation, x is positive, but there is a fraction. So remember, to get rid of fractions, we multiply by the denominator. So here we would multiply by 4 here, by 4 here, and by 4 here. So if we put in our calculator 4 times 3/4, we would get 3x. And again, it's because these cancel, but a lot of you are struggling with that. So remember, just put in your calculator 4 times 3/4 and get an answer. Then we have 4 times y, which would be 4y, and then 5 times 4, which is 20. So now we have x and y on the same side. We have x being positive, and we have no fractions. So this is standard form. So what are some things that might happen that make it a little bit harder? Let's come down here, and I'm just going to make up an equation. Let's say it ended up being negative 2/3 x plus 2y equals negative 3. Well, we still have a fraction, but we also have x being negative. If x is negative, the way that you get rid of it is to multiply by a negative. But we also have a fraction, so I would need to multiply by the denominator as well. So I would multiply by a negative 3. So times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So now here, if I do negative 3 times negative 2/3, I would get positive 2x. Then negative 3 times 2y would be minus 6y. And then equals negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. So notice the x is positive, there are no fractions, and x and y are on the same side. Notice the y is negative, but that's okay. The only thing that cannot have a negative sign is the x. So now what if it was just negative 3y, that's x, sorry, negative 3x plus 2y equals 4. Well, now there's no fractions, so we don't need to multiply by the denominator, but we do still have a negative sign. Well, if that's the case, we want to multiply by negative 1. So times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. So now we would get a positive 3x, a negative 2y, and a negative 4. Okay. So those are the things that might make standard form a little bit harder. Okay. So the last part of this says to go ahead and graph. In order to graph, we're going to go right back to our slope-intercept form where we start at b. So we would start at 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, put a point. Then we would go down 3, right 4. And then I ran out of room, so I could now do the opposite. So up 3, left 4. And then once we have those, we could go ahead and connect them. And then this is just a reminder, if the slope is integral, meaning it's a whole number, remember that the denominator is 1. So if it was 2x, we would go up 2 over 1. And the vertical change is always called the rise, and the horizontal change is always called the run. And it reminds you, if it's positive, we go up, if it's negative, we go down, and for the horizontal change, we always go to the right. So there's 2 questions on the back of this paper for you to try to do on your own. Once you get them done, come show them to me.